As we begin, we want to tell you some stories about what's going on at Lakeside. This is Heidi Dorfner. She is the chair of our church. If you go to our website, you'll see our whole leadership team under the About Us and the staff and under there to know who we are, the leaders of Lakeside. Knowing that last year, this was like a year, we've been in this process a year. It was a fully established church with all the rhythms and the bylaws and constitution. Those are all good things. You may hear me joke about it. Like, man, do we really have to do this? But they are good processes, and it's something that gives a good foundation for a church. But we wanted to begin our time with ministry stories, that God has answered prayers, that he has shown up. And one story that I want to share that may be near to my heart and dear to another family is that the church shows up in the most beautiful and the most powerful ways on some of the darkest days. So even reflecting back on the ministry year for me, as you've cared for my family and the loss of my father, who was here, and when I see the bench down the hall, it reminds me of his presence and his welcome and graciousness. But for also the Hanson family, in which you guys showed love and care and concern, the way in which we celebrated both of those beautiful lives at their services, that's a testament of a community that shows up and cares for people on the hardest of days. And so those are the moments where we could talk about how I prayed for 12 students, and there was a moment at my house, like the 12 disciples, there were 12 students in my home, eating pizza, laughing, joking, telling stories. That was a prayer that I've had for God, just give us 12. That's the beginning, that's the foundation for a youth ministry that I believe that God will do immeasurably more through this church. And there were 12. And I only imagined the 12 that Jesus had, the misfits, the goofballs, the ones that didn't get it right. And I'm like, we got that. It was awesome, and it was beautiful, and they're all different. They're coming from a different point and perspective, and I loved that. So there's a story there, but there have been seeds that have been planted. I just want to tell a story that I heard in my canoe this last Saturday. I was out fishing with a friend who, about 5.5 years ago, invited one of his friends to an outreach that we did at the very beginning called Alpha. Maybe you've heard of Alpha Ministry. It's a video-driven kind of conversational thing, and we were in the basement of Jake O'Connor's pub in Excelsior, and that was the place. And I remember this guy who had big questions. He thought really deeply, and let me tell you, those are seeds that were planted. He was on a journey. Now, I can't claim it in my statistics, that's a conversion, check it off. You know that pastors have baseball cards of home runs for sermons? No, we don't have statistical records like that. But anyhow, this Bobby, I shouldn't have said this. This guy from 5 years ago, he was on a journey. And I was fishing. And this guy joined with us. And I knew part of his story. And I said, can I just hear your story? And about a month ago, he gave his life to Christ. And it was a part of, not saying that we were a part of it, but we were just one of the seeds that was planted in the conversation that he's been on. And it reminded me never to give up. Because at that time, 5 years ago, we had all these conversations, and I knew he was on a journey, and he was asking really big, deep questions. It came around, and the friend that I was fishing with in my canoe, and this guy's in a kayak, and we just stopped fishing, and he told me his story, and he goes, I remember that back then, but that was one point. We're about scattering and dropping seeds. And 5 years later, I'm in a small lake catching fish, hearing the story of this guy who said, I gave my life to Christ. I see everything differently. My perspective, it's like I put on a new pair of sunglasses and I saw things differently. That's a story that we were a part of about 5 years ago, creating space for people to share life and to pursue Jesus and ask big and real questions. The next story is this, is that maybe some of you have watched this online when you've been out of town. Maybe you've watched this online when you were sick. The online thing, starting 3 years ago at COVID, was something that we all had to shift to, adjust to. But God is also blessed, and I want to tell you about a story of a guy named Mike. Mike watches Lakeside online. Mike and his wife Joy would say this is part of their church. This is their church. Maybe you've seen the comments online on a Sunday morning like, hey, checking in from Tucson, Arizona. Mike has been on a journey battling cancer. Mike will send me text messages, and to be honest, Mike is my uncle-in-law. It's my wife's uncle, Dixie Dow's older brother. And Mike rides his bike on the Global 6K. Mike checks in, he participates, he listens. He goes back and listens if he couldn't listen on that Sunday. But for him, in this last year, it's been a really difficult year. Cancer treatment on his throat has caused a lot of damage, and Mike lost his voice. Mike writes all of his messages on a whiteboard. That's how he communicates, or he text messages with me. But I just want to share a bit of Mike's story. And Mike, I think you're watching, so thank you for sharing your story all the way from there. May of 2022, life-changing. You've got cancer. You're going to lose your voice. Everything's been rerouted. He's got one of those stomas, and that's part of his story. Let's go to the next slide. A part of his story is going through a season of denial, anger, and blame. He went through all the changes. Why me? Which would be an honest and a fair question. Mike then also shares his wife has been by his side, a constant resource, dependable, a wing woman. I think that it should be wingman, but wing when we get it, right? Next slide. He says, God's plan, realizing there's likely a good reason for this is happening to me. And Mike's in his riding gear. He had just gotten back from a ride, and I disrupted his ride, and I said, hey, Mike, can you tell me a story? So he's in his gear. But then he's said Lakeside has been a part of his support, prayer support, a personal connection, being able to check in online when he probably couldn't show up to a public space, an extended family, knowing that there's a greater family here. He continues to share in the next slide that there have been little steps, that he moves, to just do something, try to get your mind over this stuff, and then celebrate the little things. Mike then would also share that there are bigger steps. The daily mantra, before today, better today than yesterday, setting a goal. The El Tour de Tucson, which is a bicycle race. He's done the Tour de Tonka here one year and totally got lost. He put on like 30 extra miles. We didn't know where he was. He came here to do the Tour de Tonka and get completely lost. He signed up for like the 60 route and he did the 100, whatever it was. Mike, you're awesome. But part of his story is trusting God, family, Lakeside, his medical team, and even himself. Next slide. Faith, success through perspective, strengthened with daily prayer, and look for the good and expect the best. That's Mike's story. So online ministry matters. He has connection. I know many of you, when you have been in a season when you couldn't come here, checked in, viewed online, whatever it might be. And that's just a new reality of our ministry. And that's something that we want to continue to do well and expand upon. But as we have gathered together, we're going to talk a little bit about partnership. Katie, we have a quorum. In our Constitution and bylaws, it says we need 20 people or a minimum of 20%. So when we do the math, we got a quorum. Partnership. Anything you want to say about partnership?
Well, first of all, hi. Like Steve said, I'm Heidi. I'm a church chair, and I will be completely honest. This is a role I never ever would have imagined myself in. So I was completely honored and floored when Steve approached me about it. So thank you. I'm learning. It's a learning process. This is just something I've never been involved in with church. So bear with me as I'm kind of growing in this position as well. Like he said, well, in the past, our church is kind of officially like a grown-up right now, so we have to make grown-up decisions, and sometimes they're not fun, but we ask you to be a part of those. So with the partnership form, if you are already a partner, but you are wanting to continue your journey with us, we still need you to fill out some information, and if you are brand new to us, there's no faces in here that I haven't met, but if you have more questions, concerns, want to talk to Steve more about it, I would say me, but he would probably...
Together we can answer your questions.
Yes. But yeah, so anyways, some exciting things happening in Lakeside, and we just really want you guys to all be a part of it. So.
Yeah. The part that I'm excited about next is our budget. I really am. Just wait till you hear what's going on. God is absolutely faithful. This is good. And like, oh, here's the budget. And like, numbers guys. I love number guys and gals. People who love spreadsheets. And so this is Daniel Thiessen, and Daniel's going to lead us and walk us through a financial update, which this is a story of God's faithfulness, God's provision through the generosity of God's people.
That's my favorite part too. It doesn't match the one I have up, then it might be the wrong one.
I'm a pastor, not a row and column guy. It could be my fault. When I went to go print this, they were like really close together, so I'm like, I'll just hit like add a row, and I know that kind of sometimes takes it messes up the cells, so I own that. That is not this guy. I may have made the,
I could roll with it too. I sent you the wrong side.
it's like copy and paste, they're the same, you print them out, and sorry. Thank you, Daniel. The ministry report is that in a church plant, our age, about 5.5 years old, 6 years will be this fall that we'll celebrate. We're a 6-year-old. What Daniel just described for you is really abnormal. We have been absolutely blessed by those who have partnered with us, by your faithfulness, by your generosity, by our parent church, Excelsior Covenant Church, by the denomination, that we have a positive cash balance. That is an incredible gift. But let me just say this, that it's an incredible threat. It's a potential threat to say, look what we did. But it's also God's gift and blessing for us to say, at the end of it, what did you do with what I gave you? And so what you heard Daniel saying, hey, for the next 3 years, and the good question of, it looks like we have a negative for the next 3 years. But we'd say, we're going to invest this into ministry. And it's hiring the right people and moving forward and saying, I think we can do more with what we have to reach more people with the good news and the hope of Jesus. And so that's where our leadership team, over the years, and you'd say anything to this, where we felt uncomfortable, actually, having such a positive balance that we do. Because I know right now a church plant pastor couple that I'm coaching right now in White Bear Lake, when I saw their last report, they had $8,000 in their bank. And they are going negative each week, and things are coming in, and they're just, but man, the faith that I see in them of just saying, we are just praying bold prayers that God's going to meet it. So the threat for us is comfort, and say, we believe that what we have, we want to use well, but not also bury it. Like Jesus even tells a story about one person that buries that, and when he comes back, he's like, well, it's still here. And Jesus is like, no, that's not what I gave it to use. So in that, for ministry, this last year, we've spent money to invest in ministry, for men's ministry and women's ministry, and other opportunities for student ministry that says, I know that event didn't take in the $7 that we charge for pizza, but it's going to go to connecting kids in a deeper level. Ministry happens, but it's also expensive. There are times in which we will say, we need to do this, we need to upgrade this, we need to buy this for the same thing. When things are not in the budget, the year when we had COVID, we need to buy new equipment. We may find in the future, and as we share a little bit about our challenge for our seating capacity, we could say, look what we did. No, let's talk about what God provided. And so in our ministry report, there will be an official report that comes out in mid-July, and we'll tell you about this. And we're learning the rhythms of how we got to back up some of the information that we share with you so we can prepare for this meeting, but we can't give you a full, one-year financial report because we don't have the numbers from May, and we're in June. So in the middle of July, you'll receive an official report which is kind of the history of our church, the ministry of where we've been, the steps we've taken, kind of a narrative. If you've ever been a part of a church and you've seen some of the inner workings of the church kind of behind the curtain, you're like, oh, there's a report that is kind of the history, the record of what God's been doing. It's not just numbers and details and rows and columns. It's like each one of those tells a story. So yes, I'm okay with blowing up the kids' ministry budget and going over budget in that area if we need to reach more kids and say we need what we need to tell the good story. We have a question over here. A good question. So that Joe's asked, is our membership growing each year? And this is what we're going to be discovering, that you'd want to see positive growth in membership. There's a false narrative that membership equates growth. Maybe you're asking membership versus attendance, or you're asking membership partnership. Yeah, yep. Yeah. The quick and fast answer is yes, but I think we'll answer your question when we get to the agenda item number 6, which is driving that number, or that agenda. He's asking, has our membership or our attendance grown? And we'd say partnership, those who are all with us, and I'd say yes, but we're also recognizing that today our numbers are lower than where we were last year because some people haven't re-upped, and we'll follow up with them and say, hey, you may have missed that email, you weren't there, you were out of town. And so if you're looking at partnership numbers, they wouldn't be accurate for us to give you a report right now, but if we're talking about number 6, the answer is yes, that it is up and to the right. So there's a difference between partnership and attendance. Does everyone kind of understand that? If you grew up in the Lutheran church, sometimes as soon as you're baptized into the church, you're a member. But if that family fades and doesn't attend for the next 13 years until they come back for confirmation, well, that isn't always, not picking on the Lutherans. Sorry, we have a retired Lutheran pastor in the back left corner over here. Love Larry and Judy. You guys are awesome. But sometimes that's the story, and it's not really reflective. You grew up Lutheran. All right, so we like Heidi. Anyhow, going way off. But it isn't always reflective. But the answer is yes, we are growing, and that is reflective in the giving, in the participation, and that's why we're going to be talking about number 6 here. But after we do a little partnership vote.
Yes, now we're going to move on to partnership budget vote. So I believe you guys all have your cards. I feel like I should be playing some Jeopardy music in the background or something. But if you want to go ahead and fill that out, and then Eric.
We get one more vote that's included on the ballot too, that I'm going to talk about. Yes. On your ballot is one for the budget to say, yes, I affirm this, and this is where we participate faithfully, we give sacrificially, we attend regularly. And that's what we would say are the markers of a partner. Also on there are 2 names, Connie Harstead and Kayla Hansen. You guys are both here. Kayla Hansen is over here. Kayla Hansen joined with us. Her first Sunday joining with us and her family was actually when we moved into the gym for the first time because it was stifling hot in the cafeteria. And Connie Harstead in the back. The nominating team is an official part of what we would say is we gather together and we pray and discern who's sitting on the sidelines, who's on the bench that needs a jersey to get in the game and participate in a higher level of leadership. And so it isn't just myself saying, I like this person, they're fun, I'd like to really hang out with them and talk numbers. It's a group of the vice chair, which is Eric Young, and myself, and those 2 that make up the nominating committee. And as we were figuring out these fun, like sequential things within our bylaws, we want to really live into those in a way that is faithful. And so we can't nominate and bring to you the next leader of our leadership team until we have a nominating committee. So we have to nominate a nominating committee before we nominate the next leader. Are you following me? This is where I love it. So today we're saying, would you affirm these 2 people to sit on and discern and pray and say, I wonder who is gifted, who fits this matrix of leadership that we've created to say who's gifted, who's a fan, who's all in, who's a disciple, who's a faithful follower. Their character matches. They have a love for Lakeside. They have a passion for discipleship and evangelism. This person makes for a good leader for the next leadership team. So we have 6 people on the leadership team, and then myself being the 7th. So we're going to be replacing 2 people. They'll be stepping off, and then we're going to replace 2 people so we don't clear out the whole leadership team at the same time. So in July, you're going to be invited to stay after worship service for about a 10-minute meeting where then the nominating committee will bring to you 2 nominations of people to replace those 2 people who are stepping off. Does that make sense? So if you would affirm these 2 people, we would love for you to say yes. And if you have questions, you can ask questions, and there's an option to say, maybe not. So that is our ballot. If you could fill that out, Katie is there. If we just pass them to the center, he can fold them up like he used to do in grade school. Katie and Allie will be there to help collect those, and we'll announce that in just a bit. Any other thoughts? Heidi, are you excited about this next thing? Are you?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. Okay.
So you're going to be, well, as we've been talking about the growth of Lakeside, Steve has some information that he'd like to tell you about how we are going to fit more people in to enjoy Lakeside.
So we have a beautiful partnership with our school district. They absolutely love us. They reach out, and I shared about a month ago about how the social worker said, I have a family that they can't afford springtime, summertime clothes, and is there any way that you can help? We have an open communication and huge support, and so there have been several Sundays, and maybe you can affirm this, because when you came in a little bit later, the only seats open were the ones in the front. Or you came in and be like, this feels really full. To a guest, someone who's coming in new, they want to know, is there space for me that isn't awkward? And I remember a family sitting in the front rows over here. They had 6 people in their family, and they had to go into 2 rows, and I knew how uncomfortable they were. But it happened to be the day that I was giving away bacon to the front rows, so they won on that one. I mean, that was a boom. I know them, their story. That wasn't that off-putting for them. They're fully committed to Lakeside, even as pretty new guests. However, that is an experience that we don't want people to always have. So in here, we thought, how do we solve this problem? Reached out to the staff and the custodians and the principal, and I worked all my magic, and we said, we will buy a rack of chairs. We will have a fundraiser. We'll do all these things. Our leadership team, we talked about, would it be even 2 services? How would we just add more people? On Easter, we had the largest attendance in here in this gym than we've ever had, 187 people. Did you know that matched our Christmas Eve attendance? God's doing something. I thought, great. Next week it's going to be Ghost Town. Like the Sunday after Easter is going to be Ghost Town. There were 132 people here. You know how many chairs that we have? 144. That's not okay for a new guest to come in. So in talking with the staff here, I said, hey, we would buy racks of chairs like we have over here that you've helped participate in rack. And they looked high and low, and they said, we actually don't have any place for another rack of chairs. In the same week that we're having this email conversation, I said, hey, is it possible to look at other spaces in the district? We've always had a first right of refusal for another space in the district, and they've always checked with us to say, hey, are you ready to go to that next bigger space? And we said, no, not yet. And other churches then use that space. When I reached out, they said, hey, we actually have someone that's interested in a space, but we need to hear from you because we would love to work with you. Your church, you guys are beautiful. You're gracious and generous. We would love to work with you first, but we need you to decide in 24 hours. Y'all were on, my team was on spring break, and this is the week right up before Palm Sunday, and I'm just texting, and everyone's pinging in, and it was awesome. Totally disrupting vacations out in Montana, whatever it was. People are like, yeah, I think this is what God was stirring something that we, within 24 hours, said, yes, our next move isn't expanding chairs here, isn't expanding to even a second trailer with racks of chairs, and I can get creative, and we can get logistically whatever, but we're going to be moving to, in the fall, Chaska High School auditorium. So this is a picture of Chaska High School. If you've been with us for Christmas Eve, it's almost an identical setup, but it's Chaska High School. I remember touring all these places. When we first opened up Lakeside, our first location that we toured was this school. And you know what I felt about this school? What did I feel about this school? It smelled. It was it smelled like a hamster cage. And I'm like, this is not a place for a church. This is small. I had these grand visions. But the story that God's developed and grown in us has been beautiful here. But we believe that this is the next part of our journey. The setting, the location. Anytime you move locations for a church plant, you will lose 5 to 10% of your people. But you will also backfill about 15 to 20%. Just right in the beginning. Because people, it's out of the rhythm. It's not in their normal pathway. It's like, oh, where'd that church go? I can't, whatever that might be. This may not be awesome for you, but we're going to invite you to believe in it. That in those 24 hours, we saw God moving so fast. and even releasing us from what we thought might have been comfortable to something that was a bit disruptive. And so this is going to be the place where we go. Now I'm going to let you know, we have thought through a number of those questions, like where are our kids going to go? Westwood had their origins. This was their second stop before they built a church over here. Church is possible in this space for kids and for nursery and everything in between. And so we are excited about this fall on September 17th that will be our grand opening. Do you remember when we opened up our first service ever in 2017? Do you remember the date? September 17th. I was trying to set you up. So September 17th in 2017 was the first time we gathered for worship here, that we opened the doors. And in 2023, September 17 will be when we opened our doors, kind of a 2.0 launch. This summer, we're going to invite you to participate in new trainings and to come say, hey, I've been on the sidelines. I'm ready to get in the game. I'd love to serve on a team. I'd love to be a part of hospitality, because we're going to have to rethink how we do welcome and hospitality and greeting. And I'm just going to say right now, because you guys are a gracious and affirming crowd, that we can't have coffee in the auditorium. I was waiting for okay, thank you. There's just some things that we're going to have to live into and believe that God has for us. There's two people that just left. Like, coffee? I'm out. Come on, Ryan. You'll be back next week, I know, because you're leading worship. No, they have to get going. I know that. So this is the space that we're going to be in. There's another picture that we can show. There's this beautiful space that we walk into. To be really honest, some of you are thinking, aren't there sports and tournaments? There are. And we will work with that and work through that. So there'll be weekends where there's basketball and volleyball, and it'll be challenging. But what if we created a space of hospitality that they walked in and said, are those donut holes for us? I don't know. I think that's worth $50 more of donut holes. Would you? Would you agree? So there's a space here, maybe one more picture, but this is the entrance into the auditorium. And just around the other side of the auditorium, we saw the staff lounge. And we're like, we could hold meetings in the staff lounge. But then we're like, no, that makes a better nursery, because it's the closest and the best space that we have to the auditorium. And so this is the cafeteria open space, and we have students from Lakeside who are in high school that attend this high school. And what if they were able to say, hey, I have church here? I wonder what that does to open up their narrative to say, hey, I like this place, and this is where we hold church. Do you ever want to join with me? So there's connections that we are forming and making already in this story. But in the end of August, you're going to hear it multiple times that we're going to hold an open house to say, hey, just come walk through this space. For those of you who are on ministry teams of kids ministry and worship ministry and hospitality and connections, we're going to do a practice setup. We're going to do hey, here's a dry run. We're going to go in there and set up as if we're holding church. And so there will be opportunities for you to come walk through, explore, but also for us to say, let's pray for this and what God's doing in this next season. But before we do that, we'll continue holding services here throughout the summer. I've talked with the staff already. They couldn't be more excited for us. Not to leave, but for what God is already doing in and through this story. So we've said, hey, I've heard from many of you, are we going to abandon this school, these kids? I've heard from many of you that said, hey, we love this place. These are our origins. Can we still keep supporting? We will find ways that we will continue to support this school, but we also know that there will be new opportunities to support and meet needs in the high school that are pretty unique and quite different than what we're going to meet. You had a question? Off of Pioneer Trail, near the Home Depot. I know that place well. But just east of the Home Depot on Pioneer Trail will be this. So when you think about logistics and signs and welcome and how to direct people in, it's going to be great. Can you take her question? There will be coffee, but we will do it afterwards. And we will not police. There's going to be no coffee police at the front door. If a guest walks in with their caribou, we're like, that's cool. But some of our rhythms are going to change. The way we greet and say welcome, how we bless kids. It's hard to get kids up there for kids' message. That may change a bit too. But we believe that this is our next thing. Thoughts and comments?
I'm excited.
Yeah. Thoughts, comments? It is. I'm excited for it. Other thoughts? This is good. I'm going to invite you to stand. Do we have a report on our...
Right here.
You got it. I'm going to let you do the official.
You want me to read it? Okay. I just love how in sync we are together here. Okay, so for the 23-24 annual budget, We passed with 47 yes, 0 no.
Wow.
Kayla, part of the nominating committee,
All in.
46 yes, 0 no. And Connie, somebody must have voted for themselves, 47 yes and 0 no.
Someone voted for themselves. That was fast math. Awesome. That was good. We have a lot to be thankful for, but there's also opportunities for you to become more involved. If you have been with us and you're like, I'd love to be a part of this in a deeper, in a fuller way, we'll get you on a team. We'll give you a jersey, which will mean like new T-shirts. We have a lot of fun things, mailers and signs, and we're gonna send you out there in the dark of night to be like, here's a sign, church is starting soon, that kind of stuff. We're gonna have a ton of fun with this, and it's gonna be great. So we couldn't be more excited about what God's doing to push us a bit out of our comfort zone, but this is exactly what we need in this season and this time. Let's give God thanks. Let's pray. God, we give you thanks for the ways in which you disrupt us. You give us more than what we can handle, that you entrust us with the things of the kingdom, that others would hear of your great name. That more people in this community would know who you are, that it would change their lives, not only in this generation, but the generations to come. So God, may we be faithful. May we trust in you. May we be faithful with what you give to us to put to use, to be good stewards of all that you've entrusted to us. And God, we see from the lines and the columns that there's a lot. Thank you for your faithfulness to us, for the generosity of your people. May we be found faithful. May your story be made much louder in this community. But God, in this, grow in us, strengthen us, stretch us. And God, we do thank you for this divine disruption, but also for your provision. It's in your name we pray. Amen.